All right, so like, have you ever wished you had like a cheat sheet for life? You know, like a guide to navigating those tricky human interactions we all have to deal with.
Oh, totally.
Like if only there was like some kind of instruction manual.
Right.
Well, get this. Today we're diving into a book that's basically just that.
Ooh.
It's Dale Carnegie's classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And trust me, even if you think you know it, we're about to uncover some seriously valuable stuff.
What's fascinating about this book is how it stood the test of time. Like, Carnegie wasn't writing for the digital age or anything.
Right.
But his advice is, like, shockingly relevant, even now, maybe even more so.
And here's a little something from the preface that I thought was interesting. You know, that Carnegie actually originally developed all this material for engineers.
Engineers?
Yeah.
Engineers. Not exactly the first group that comes to mind when you think of needing help winning friends. Right. But think about it this way. They were realizing back then that all their technical skills could only get them so far. To really climb that ladder, to really get ahead, they had to master this art of, like, leading people, motivating them, building relationships. And doesn't that sound familiar even today?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's all about those people skills. So let's jump into Carnegie's fundamental techniques in handling people. Yeah.
Okay.
He starts strong, leading with a principle that I think you all struggled with at one point or another. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Oh, for sure.
Sounds simple enough on the surface, but...
Oh, yeah. Way easier said than done.
Yeah.
Carnegie doesn't beat around the bush with this one. He comes right out and says criticism is like a homing pigeon, always coming back to roost.
Right.
And when it comes back, it's not to make things better.
No, not at all.
You know, he connects this to B.F. Skinner's work on behavior. The whole rewards are much more effective than punishment idea.
Oh, yeah.
Like, think about it. When someone's constantly criticizing you, how receptive are you really going to be to their suggestions? It just makes you defensive, right?
Really, yeah. You just put up walls.
Yeah, you're not really listening anymore. And Carnegie uses this great example about George B. Johnston, a safety coordinator at a construction site. Johnston's whole thing was to try to get these workers to wear their hard hats, right?
Okay, yeah.
So naturally, he starts out yelling, writing people up, trying to be, you know, the hard hat police.
Oh,
Yeah, totally backfired. The second his back was turned, hard hats came off. It wasn't until he, like, totally changed his approach and started appealing to their desire for safety instead of just, like, barking orders that things started to change for real. Like, it's that old saying, you know, you can lead a horse to water.
Right, exactly.
But you can't make it drink or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what Carnegie is getting at is this, it's about understanding what makes people tick. We're not as likely to change our ways just because someone orders us to. But when we see the benefit, when we understand how it helps us, that's when real change happens.
Okay, so next principle. This one really hit home for me. Give honest and sincere appreciation.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Think about this. When was the last time that someone gave you genuine appreciation for your work? How did that make you feel?
Oh, it's amazing.
Right, like a little boost.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's a fundamental human need to feel significant. Carnegie even uses examples like Abraham Lincoln,
Yeah.
you know, went from a small town nobody to one of the most influential figures in history.
Oh, for sure.
That drive, that need for significance, it's incredibly powerful.
Total.
And gets us, it's not just about, like, grand achievements either. Carnegie tells this amazing story about a marriage that was on the rocks. Like, this couple was on the verge of calling it quits.
Wow.
And it was saved by something so incredibly simple. 6 red roses.
Really?
And instead of focusing on his wife's flaws, you know, the things that were bugging him, this husband sends her these 6 red roses, right, with a note. The note says, I can't think of 6 things I would change about you. I love you just the way you are.
Talk about a light bulb moment. Completely transformed their relationship.
That's incredible.
So isn't that wild?
There's that shift in perspective.
That's the power of genuine appreciation, right? It's not just about, like, throwing out empty flattery. It's about recognizing the good and making people feel valued for who they are.
It reminds me of something a therapist once told me. He said, love is looking at someone and seeing their potential, even when they can't see it in themselves. And this principle from Carnegie really captures that, I think.
It does. It does. Okay, one more principle in this section before we move on. This one's all about arousing in the other person an eager want. Carnegie uses this really vivid analogy of trying to get a stubborn calf to go into a barn.
Okay.
You can push and pull all you want, but until that calf actually wants to go in there, you're going nowhere. Right. It's the same with people.
I've never thought about it that way.
It's true, yeah. He's not talking about manipulation here. It's more about trying to understand what the other person really wants, and then finding common ground.
Yeah.
And he actually shares this really interesting story about how he got a huge discount on his hotel rent. And the crazy part is, he didn't even have to bring it up directly.
Oh, wow. How'd he do that?
He figured out what the manager really cared about, keeping a good tenant, maximizing profits, that kind of thing. And then he just framed the entire conversation around those things.
Wow.
And it worked.
That's amazing.
Isn't that something else? It's
Yeah.
like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right. Absolutely.
Carnegie really nailed that. And speaking of caring, his next section is all about 6 ways to make people like you.
Okay.
And the first one, honestly, it's so simple. It's so obvious, but I think a lot of us forget to do it. Become genuinely interested in others.
Yeah.
And this isn't about pretending to listen while you're just waiting for your turn to talk,
Right.
This is about actual genuine curiosity. It's about really, truly wanting to see things from someone else's perspective.
Absolutely.
Carnegie actually tells this kind of funny story about this really, really boring bridge party that he went to once.
Okay.
Yeah, he was ready to just write the whole night off,
Yeah.
But then he decides to try this experiment. Instead of trying to be the most interesting person in the room, he just focuses on being interested.
Oh.
So he just starts asking questions, really listening to people's answers. And guess what?
What?
He ends up having these incredible conversations.
Right.
All because he shifted his focus from himself to the people around him.
Interesting.
And it's like they say, you can learn something from everyone if you're willing to listen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And it speaks to that basic human desire, right?
Yeah.
To be seen, to be heard, to feel like your experiences matter.
Totally. Okay, ready for some more Carnegie wisdom?
Yeah. Hit me.
All right. Principle number 2 for being more likable. Smile.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about some cheesy, forced grin,
Right, right.
No one likes that.
No, it's got to be genuine.
It's got to be real. Carnegie means a genuine, heartfelt smile, the kind that just lights up your face and makes you instantly more approachable. And there's actually science to back this up.
Oh, well, really?
Oh, yeah. There are studies that show that smiling actually releases endorphins, not just in you, but in the person you're smiling at, too.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
It's this mini mood booster that, spreads these good vibes.
That's cool.
And it's contagious, right? You can't help but smile back when someone smiles at you with genuine warmth.
I know. It's impossible.
Carnegie actually tells this really sweet story about this woman with a baby who's in a vet's waiting room.
Ah.
It's one of those, tense waiting rooms. Everyone's on edge. And then suddenly, this baby just flashes this big gummy grin at this, grumpy-looking man.
Ah.
And, of course, the man can't help but smile back. And just like that, the whole atmosphere of the room changes. People start talking. The tension eases, all because of one little smile.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. It's a good reminder that, even the smallest gestures can have these ripple effects.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
like that quote, be the reason someone smiles today, but for real.
I love that.
Okay, next principle. And this is one that I am so guilty of breaking all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It's so true. It's so simple yet.
So hard.
It really is. We've all been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Introduced to someone, had a nice conversation, and then poof, their name vanishes from our brains.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It never existed.
Right. It's our memories just go, nope, not important. But Carnegie points to guys like Jim Farley, this master of names. Farley knew the names of thousands of people.
Oh, my goodness.
And it wasn't a magic trick or anything.
Right.
He just made the effort. He would connect their names with their faces, little details about their lives. He showed that he cared.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's you're saying you're worth remembering.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And who doesn't want to feel like that, right?
Right.
And Carnegie actually tells the story about a cafeteria worker, this woman who was always kind of grumpy,
Right.
never smiled or anything. But then one day, he remembered her name.
Yeah.
And she totally lit up.
Oh, wow.
They had a nice chat. It made her day. And it was all because he'd made that tiny effort to remember her name. It's a great reminder that remembering names, it's not just about etiquette, it's about respect.
Right. Exactly. You're validating their existence.
Okay. Next one is a biggie, and this kind of ties into everything we've been talking about so far. It's about being a good listener.
Okay.
Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. And this goes way beyond just being quiet while someone else is talking, you know. It's about actively listening. It's about asking questions, really engaging with what they're saying, making them feel like they're the only person in the room.
Right, being present.
Exactly. And you know who was apparently really good at this? Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? Like, even as busy as he was, Carnegie talks about how Roosevelt, even as a young man, would always seek out experts in different fields just so he could pick their brains.
That's pretty impressive.
He knew that everyone has something valuable to teach you if you just take the time to listen.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay, we're on a roll. Next principle. Talk in terms of the other person's interests.
Okay.
So this goes a step further than just finding common ground. It's about figuring out what makes the other person tick.
Okay.
It's about understanding their passions, their motivations, and then finding ways to connect with them on that level.
Got it.
And Carnegie tells this kind of funny story. It's about this guy who was obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with boats.
Boats?
Boats.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he would just corner people at parties and just talk their ears off about boats, completely oblivious to the fact that they were bored out of their minds.
Oh, no.
Right. We all know that person, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But anyway, the point of the story is this. It's great to be passionate and all, but you also have to be mindful of other people. You know, don't be afraid to kind of steer the conversation in a different direction if you get the sense that the other person is, like, totally over it.
Right. Read the room.
Exactly. All right, last one in this section, and it's a good one. Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
Okay.
And this goes back to that need for significance that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
That deep down desire to feel valued, to feel respected, to feel appreciated for who we are.
Totally. We all want that.
And it doesn't always have to be these grand gestures either, right?
No, not at all.
Sometimes it's the little things.
The little things mean a lot.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered some really good stuff so far, but get ready because this next section is where Carnegie really brings it all home.
Oh, yeah.
It's about winning people to your way of thinking.
Okay.
And before you get any ideas, this isn't about like manipulation or anything like that.
Yeah.
This isn't about some Jedi mind trick. It's more about understanding, you know, the psychology of persuasion.
Okay.
How to communicate really effectively and build consensus without resorting to force or trickery.
Got it.
And he kicks it off with this statement that I think is like both humbling and freeing at the same time. You can't win an argument. Seriously, think about it. Have you ever actually changed your mind because someone just like argued you into the ground?
Probably not, no.
Right. If anything, it just makes you want to dig in your heels even harder,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like you become even more convinced that you're right.
Totally.
And Carnegie's point is, even if you are right, you've probably just sacrificed something far more valuable, the other person's goodwill. You know, their willingness to see things from your perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He tells this really great story about, of all people, Ben Franklin.
Okay.
Apparently, young Ben was quite the hothead.
Oh, really?
Always ready for a good debate. But as he got older, he learned the power of just like holding his tongue sometimes, you know, listening more than he spoke. And guess what? It totally transformed him. Like, he went from being the guy everyone avoided getting into an argument with to this respected leader.
Wow, just from learning to listen.
It's amazing, right? It's like, you can be right or you can be happy. And sometimes choosing happiness means just letting go of that need to win every single argument.
I like that.
Okay, you ready for more?
Hit me.
Okay, Carnegie's next principle, it's short, it's sweet, but it is so important. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, you're wrong.
Okay.
And this goes back to that whole like defensive reaction we're talking about. When someone tells you you're wrong, your instinct is to protect yourself, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Even if it means like clinging to a belief that maybe deep down you're not so sure about anymore.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, when you judge another, you do not define them. You define yourself. Like, instead of trying to change someone's mind, why not just try to understand their perspective a little bit better? Okay, so this next principle, this one's a toughie, but it is so powerful. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. And Carnegie actually shares a story about a time when he himself messed up. Big time. And we're talking a live radio broadcast.
Ooh, that's got to be stressful.
Oh, I can't even imagine. But anyway, so he's got this choice, right? He can either try to downplay it or try to blame it on someone else, but instead, he just comes clean. He owns up to his mistake, he apologizes, and you know what? People ended up liking him more for it.
Really?
Because it showed that he was human. It showed that he could admit when he was wrong. We all make mistakes. It takes real courage to own up to them, especially publicly.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
It's about integrity. And I think that goes a long way in building trust.
For sure.
Okay. This next one is all about setting the right tone, which is so important in any kind of interaction, right?
Right.
Begin with praise and honest appreciation. You know how they say you catch more flies with honey than vinegar?
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like that. Carnegie uses the example of Charles Schwab, this brilliant businessman. And Schwab knew how to get the best out of his employees. So there was this one time where some of his workers got caught breaking the no smoking rule.
Uh-oh.
Right. Busted. But instead of coming down on them, yelling and screaming, Schwab, he does something really unexpected. He gives each of them a cigar.
What?
And says something like, I would appreciate it if you enjoyed these outside.
Wow. That's great.
Right.
That's brilliant.
He acknowledges the issue without making them feel like, completely terrible. He actually turns it into like a positive interaction.
That's really good.
And that's the power of praise. All right, this next one, it's a little bit nuanced. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly.
Okay.
And this is not about being passive aggressive.
Right.
It's about finding a way to correct someone without making them feel like they're being attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carnegie gives this example of how to critique someone's work in a way that doesn't feel personal. Instead of saying, you did this wrong, you could say something like, I noticed this part might be even stronger with a bit more detail.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Right. So you're focusing on the work, not the person.
Right.
And you're offering suggestions for improvement in a way that just feels constructive,
Yeah.
not critical. Okay. Next up is a principle that honestly requires a little bit of humility on our part. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Let's be real. No one likes a hypocrite, right? And we've all been there. We've all messed up at some point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But by acknowledging our own flaws, it just makes us more relatable.
Yeah, totally.
More human. It levels that playing field.
Mm-hmm.
It creates this sense of camaraderie.
For sure.
Okay. Moving on to a principle that is all about empowering others. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Think about it. How do you feel when someone just tells you what to do?
Yeah, not great.
Versus when someone asks for your input, your ideas?
Yeah, it's a totally different feeling, like you actually matter.
Exactly. It's the difference between feeling like, just a cog in a machine versus feeling like a valued member of a team.
Totally.
And when you ask questions, you're engaging people's creativity. You're allowing them to use their problem-solving skills.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Asking questions is like teaching someone to fish.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Right. It empowers them to find their own solutions.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. This next one I think is really important. Let the other person save face. We've all been there. We've messed up. We've said the wrong thing. We've made a bad call. And in those moments, the absolute last thing you want is to be publicly humiliated.
Oh, yeah, it's the worst.
The worst. Right. Carnegie uses this historical example. He talks about Kaiser Wilhelm II's chancellor.
Okay.
And how this guy could have handled this whole PR nightmare so much better if he had just allowed the Kaiser to save face.
Interesting.
It's this powerful reminder that even when someone is in the wrong, it's still so important to treat them with respect.
Yeah.
To give them a way to kind of preserve their dignity. A little empathy goes a long way.
It really does.
All right, 2 more to go. This one's close to my heart. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise.
I like that one.
Right. This reminds me of something a coach once told me. You get more bees with honey.
Oh, yeah?
Positive reinforcement is so powerful. When we feel appreciated for our efforts, even the little ones, it just motivates us to keep going.
Absolutely.
To keep striving for improvement. All right, ready for the grand finale?
Yes. Bring it on.
Okay. The final principle in this section is all about inspiring people to be their best selves. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to.
Okay.
Have you ever had someone tell you that you were good at something, even if maybe you weren't so sure yourself?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What does that make you want to do?
It makes you kind of want to prove them right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When someone believes in us, it kind of nudges us to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what this principle is all about. It's about setting high expectations for people, but then also making sure they know that you believe they can actually achieve them.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. Wow, I feel like we covered so much today. We explored all these timeless principles from Dale Carnegie for, winning friends and influencing people. And these aren't just like some cheesy tricks.
No, not at all.
These are tools that we can all use
To build better relationships.
to build stronger relationships, communicate better, and maybe even create a slightly more harmonious world.
Okay.
And the best part is, these principles aren't about like getting what you want,
No.
It's about understanding what makes people tick, connecting with them, on a human level, and finding those win-win situations. It's like Carnegie says in the book, the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. And honestly, I think that same logic, it applies to so many different parts of life.
It really does.
When you approach others with empathy, respect, and this genuine desire to understand, it just opens up this whole world of possibilities.
I think that's a great place to end it. And for our listeners, the next time you find yourself, in a tricky situation, think back to some of this wisdom from Dale Carnegie.
Yes.
You might just be amazed at the difference a little kindness and understanding can make.
Couldn't have said it better myself.